Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be talking about the film Dune Part 2. Fun fact, Chicopsa is the name of the Fremen language, and the film employed David Peterson, who expanded on the language from the book and created new words with their own meanings. And there was a dialect coach to make sure that they pronounced all of these new words correctly. This film came out in 2024 and stars Timothee Chalamet, Zendaya, and Rebecca Ferguson, and was directed by Denis Villeneuve. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Dune Part 2 picks up where the last movie ended, with Paul, the last survivor of House Atreides, and his mother, Lady Jessica, joining the Fremen to find safety from the Harkonnens. Some people think that Paul is the chosen Messiah and will help return Arrakis or Dune back to the control of the Fremen, while some think that a Fremen would be that person to free Arrakis, not some outsider from some other planet. Paul must unite the Fremen and stage an attack on the Emperor and the Harkonnens to not only get vengeance for his father's death, but also try and bring a better life for the Fremen on Arrakis. Dune is a sci fi epic filled with action. It has similar vibes to Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, Lord of the Rings The Two Towers, or Avatar The Way of the Water. Dune Part 2 is one of the very rare occasions where the sequel is better than the original, which is saying something considering I thought the first one was really good. I wondered why the book would be split up into two movies, and then I read the book and it made sense because it is not an easy read. The book builds this massive world, which can oftentimes be confusing, and adapting that into this movie that casual viewers as well as book readers alike can enjoy is a huge feat, let alone trying to do that in one movie. So it's good that they split it in two. This movie is just epic in the best ways and prove that Denis understood the source material and how to adapt it for the screen. He knew what to cut from the books and what the audience would want to see and what they would be able to understand. As we move through this film, it still feels like we are world building, but not as much as in the first movie. This movie does a great job at slowly still building up this world of Dune more while also progressing the story forward at a nice pace to make sure that you understand what's going on. Timothy Chalamet leads this movie as Paul Atreides, or Usul Muad'dib, or Lisan Al Gaib, or the Kwisatz Haderach, who was demanding on screen and really brought the character to life. Paul is the chosen one, and we see that trope a lot in films, but in this film, they make Paul work for that title and really gain the trust and respect of the people of Dune. People constantly are telling him how he should live his life. And I loved how Paul didn't listen to them and instead, for the most part, paved his own path with the exception of his mother indirectly interfering with what Paul is doing, which he doesn't fully grasp. The character of Paul is an interesting one because he walks this path in between religion and politics, is a foreigner destined to lead the local people, and his future shows that he could either be a great leader of Dune or the potential destroyer. His character is the protagonist, but there is still this question of what his leadership will bring to the galaxy. All I know is that his story was so interesting to follow, and it had me on the edge of my seat. Seeing Paul riding Shai Halud was so cool to see, And I was like, oh my God, we not only get to see how the Fremen get around, but how difficult it is to master riding a worm. To further show Paul's greatness, we see that he is riding a grandfather worm, which is considered to be bigger than the average. The scene was so worth the build up, and then even more exciting, we see more people throughout the film riding different worms. Zendaya was spectacular as Chani, who is Paul's friend and later lover. I enjoyed the chemistry she had with Timothy, and she brought this intensity and vulnerability to Chani. Chani is one that has fallen for this man, but doesn't believe he is some prophesized person that will bring prosperity to Dune. She tries her best to support him, but as the film goes on, she sees Paul going down this path that he was so worried about, and you can tell that she is worried on how this will affect her home. Even with her doubts, she was a fierce ally to have and was a great fighter and proved detrimental in the final battle. I thought it was interesting to see the parallels to the first movie and how in that movie we end with Paul and her setting off to join the Fremen. And in this film, we end with her walking away from Paul and going somewhere away from him after he said that he would marry the Princess Irulan after they have been through so much and going down this path that may lead to destruction. Chani was the person I feel that truly kept Paul grounded and loved him, but wanted to protect her people. And in the end, she is realizing that he has the potential to ruin Dune and truly isn't the person that she thought he was. Stilgar, who is played by Javier Bardem in this film, sees Paul as a prophet and is training him in some of the Fremen ways. He was kind of the comedic relief in this movie, which wasn't something I thought would be needed, but was a great addition. He represented these Fremen who believed in this prophecy and believed Paul is the chosen one that the prophecy spoke about, while the other Fremen, like Chani, believed that the person who would lead Dune to greatness would be a Fremen, not some outworlder. I love seeing him show what people who believed in this prophecy would do in this situation and what role they would play in Paul's ascension. I would say that he is like the spark that lit the match of this idea that Paul was the Lisan al Gaib, and then it just caught on like wildfire. And with every feat that Paul completed, they gained more supporters. It's crazy to see how this happened with word of mouth and just became bigger and bigger. Stilgar was like the ultimate hype man throughout the entire movie for Paul and really believed in his ability to change the planet for the better. When the first Dune came out, there was a lot of talk about different cast members, but I feel like the one that was not talked about enough, considering her sizable role, was Rebecca Ferguson, who plays Lady Jessica, who later becomes a Reverend Mother for the Fremen in this film. Rebecca is a great actress, and prior to the events of this movie, we see that she was taught by the Bene Gesserit, which some consider to be witches. But one thing I know they know how to do is to have a plan and set it in motion and be able to change so much, oftentimes with it appearing that they aren't even involved. In this film, Jessica lays out this path for Paul to follow and just drops so many little breadcrumbs that get him right where she wants him. Chani seems to see this, but unfortunately, she is no match for Jessica's planning. Jessica talking to her daughter through the movie or throughout the movie was very weird to see, but I know she has a special connection with the unborn child because of the poison that she took to become the Reverend Mother, and she has frequent conversations with this unborn child. Rebecca did such a great job taking on this role of a mother who wants to protect her kids and uses her knowledge and power to put them in places where they'll be respected and powerful. Without Jessica, I feel like Paul would not have succeeded, and she just seems like a puppet master who will always be one step ahead. Anya Taylor-Joy playing Aaliyah, who is Jessica's unborn child and Paul's sister, was unexpected but nice to see. She didn't really have many lines, but Anya is always a positive when I see her acting. I knew she was in the movie when she popped up on the premiere carpet, but I just didn't know what her role was going to be. Na Baron feyd-rautha is chillingly portrayed by Austin Butler, and I was wondering how he would be introduced into this film. And wow, he proved that he was the right choice for this role. They took a risk with this character's design, and I felt like it was perfect to show even more how deranged this person is. I would say that he is like the foil to Paul's character, and he is an absolute psycho. From the moment we meet him, I was shocked when he is getting ready for battle, and to test his knife, he slits one of the girls' throats and then stabs the other one repetitively, and then turns to the person who gave him the blade, and it's like the tip is not sharp enough, and this is just all with like a straight face. He is the successor to the Harkonnens, and his voice reminded me of the Barons, but he had these black teeth with a bald head and no eyebrows, and he really just looked like someone who would kill for fun. We can see from when he took over Arrakis that in order to deal with the Fremen, he could just, work with them, but he decided to exterminate them instead because he said, why control them when I can just kill them? The way this villain was written is kind of my favorite way to see villains written, where there's not much justification to his craziness. They just let them be crazy, but they also don't make him dumb. And he, may have an inflated ego, but he was pretty smart. Austin portrayed this character in a way that had me feeling worried that he would actually be a problem, and definitely was a great addition to this film. Stellan Skarsgård was great once again as the Baron Harkonnen, who is the head of House Harkonnen and one of the people who led the extermination of House Atreides. I am always shocked when I realize that this is Stellan Skarsgård because if you look at him outside of this movie and then compare it to him inside of this movie, you will be shocked. And then to further, beyond just the looks, you hear his voice outside the movie and then you hear his voice in the movie and you're like, wow, like that's a good actor to be able to completely fool the viewer to think that they're a completely different person. The Baron Harkonnen holds a lot of power and influence, but because of how big he is and how he needs devices to help hold him up, I am always shocked that someone hasn't killed him. He is one that is smart and evil, which comes in handy when he is trying to get rid of foes. When the Emperor comes to Arrakis, instead of just groveling, he invites the other houses, which seemed like it was a plan to either get rid of the Emperor or to start a war between the houses. It was interesting to find out that he is the grandfather to Paul through Jessica, who, as a Bene Gesserit, was not told of her own parentage. I'm glad that he died in the end because he deserved it, and it was even better that it was from the hands of Paul. Raban is in charge of Arrakis in the beginning of this movie, and we quickly find out that he doesn't know what he's doing. He was a fierce warrior, but I think that's because he was born into Harkonnen nobility and has the backing of his uncle. But as he loses some of that credibility to his brother, we see him running away at the end like a cat with its tail tucked in between its legs. Through Dave Bautista, we see a range of emotions with Raban and how the actions of Paul made him react emotionally, which further showed his uncle that he was not fit to lead Arrakis. Josh Brolin returns as Gurney, and he seemed to serve as a clear reminder of Paul's past and a voice that whispered in Paul's ear that revenge needs to happen. Even after all the time that had passed, he was still loyal to House Atreides and fought alongside Paul no matter what. His one goal was to kill Raban, and I was happy that he got to do that. Florence Pugh was lovely as the Princess Irulan, who is the daughter of the Emperor. When I read the book, I realized that she starts off every chapter And it's basically like an excerpt from like her diary, but she's not physically in the book until like maybe towards the end, which is why I think they decided not to have her in the first film and hold off her character's appearance until this film. She still does offer this kind of narration, and we see her adding, notes to her journal, even though it's like some future electronic device that she's using. But we get to see some of the events and how she explains them as she is making notes of what's going on and putting them in this diary. So most of the time, she's not really in the action, but she's just watching and observing. Her character seemed like one that was taught by the Bene Gesserit, but it also one that questioned how they went about their actions. While watching, I was thinking that if the Bene Gesserit listened to her, they could have possibly stopped Paul because she mentioned that he was alive, but they decided instead to just keep going on with their plan, which they soon came to regret. Also, all of her outfits were cool, especially all of the headpieces that they had. The Padishah Emperor, who was played by Christopher Walken, looked stressed the entire movie. He thought he could sneakily get rid of an entire house, and that plan completely backfired. And as a politician, you could just tell that as he listened to what was happening on Arrakis, he grew worried that the truth would come out. He is very much a man that not only seems concerned with himself and how his family can stay in power, but how he can sneakily maneuver as a politician without getting caught. He has a lot of power, but doesn't understand that sometimes power isn't everything. The costume designs were cool in this movie and really helped to identify the different groups that we were focusing on or to differentiate groups when there were multiple groups present. With the amount of information we have to learn about this world and not to mention the characters, it was cool that they made these costumes to make it a little bit easier to distinguish different groups of people and where their allegiances may lie. The cinematography is great in this film, and I just love the use of light and color or lack of color in some scenes. Greg Fraser is the director of photography for this film, and I just felt like he helped make this planet with sand as far as the eye can see look so beautiful and vibrant. On the other hand, we see Gadi Prime, which is the Harkonnen home planet, which is shown in this achromatic style or black and white, but the lighting makes sure to highlight the right things and still make this planet look interesting even though it's void of colors. I'm not sure if it's in his realm as well, but the way that they did the fireworks with a lack of color was also kind of cool to see. Upon further research, I found that they used infrared cameras for the Gadi Prime scene, and infrared allows filmmakers to work with a spectrum of light that's not visible to the naked eye, and it really captured my attention by making the planet look unreal in the fact that there was just a lack of color. But even with that, everything still looked so real, and the people on that planet looked more intimidating. I just think it was a job well done, making sure that the film looked good, which further elevates the film as a whole. Hans Zimmer comes in with the music, and to be honest, not much to say because it was just fantastic. Like, it's as if he just knew this would be the perfect sound for this particular scene. And when I watched it, I was like, wow, just to be able to read or see a scene and then compose some epic music for it is super impressive. The choreography was done really well in the fight scenes, especially the ones with feyd-rautha. Fade was a killer, and while he could have taken the easy way out and shot someone or assassinated them, he instead just became super deadly with a blade to the point where some of the best fighters couldn't even take him out. I think showing the fight with him killing the Atreides men in the middle of the film showed that he was scarier than you may have first thought because he knew how to best people in hand to hand or knife to knife combat. Even when we get to the end of the film and to the fight between Feyd and Paul, we see how precise the choreography is, and they made sure to note that this is a night fight. They will need to be close to each other to get some blows in. The scene also further showed that Paul may be a prophet and he may be good at a lot of things, including fighting, but he's not invincible, and Fade almost kills him, but Paul pulls a last minute victory. The way that the fights were choreographed were fantastic and made the fights intense. And even though you had a feeling one person would win, there was always no clear winner when you were watching these fights go on. The Fremen in this movie seem to be influenced by Arabs, but more specifically, like the Bedouin, who are nomadic Arab people who live in the desert, but also the Sand peoples. It's interesting to me to see that this sci fi epic is still grounded in reality. I just have to say that this cast knows how to dress or hire the right people to dress them because, my God, the press outfits were great. Making the film is great, but you also have to promote the film. And this cast said, okay, well, if I have to promote this film, I'm going to look damn good doing it. There were some coordinating outfits, some that just stood out and were all around, just some exciting choices that drew attention to the cast. And for people who didn't know the film, probably sparked some interest because this cast knew how to own a red carpet. With this film, they released this special Dune bucket, and it kind of took the internet by storm, and I could not just ignore it. I happen to have one because why not? And I would have never thought about buying this, but I thought it was kind of cool. I would never eat popcorn out of it, but it's a cool souvenir from the movie. So you have a little, it looks like a little worm. The movie is amazing, and while there are so many freaking great scenes, my favorite part is a simple one. When Paul uses the voice on the older Reverend Mother and tells her silence. I have been a day one hater of the Reverend Mother and how she orchestrated this whole thing with the extinction of House Atreides, and I love how it kind of backfired, and even though Paul has lost a lot, he came back angrier than ever. I love that his voice in that moment was so powerful that it just sent her stumbling back and let her know that her time is up. And I just love Jessica's little smirk after, where I just bet in her mind she was thinking, how do you like them apples? I'm glad that Paul's use of the voice has gotten better because in the first movie, he was struggling. And I am glad that she was there to witness his return and see that all of her work to get rid of House Atreides didn't work as she expected it to. Dune Part 2 is just epic. I think this will go down as one of the best sci fi movies. There are more books that can be adapted, but I will say that this movie has a definitive end, but also the ending is just the beginning. While I think the first Dune was great, this one just expands and went big and it paid off because this was truly a great film. Thank you for watching my video. I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. If you haven't subscribed, please do so you can keep up to date with more of my videos. But besides that, everyone stay safe, have fun, and goodbye.